Something always bothers me with demos of vibe-coded apps. They're just demos. While they look very polished and impressive, no one will ever use the app. But the hard part, building apps, lies right there. Building something that can actually work for users. I've built software now for over 25 years, both as an engineer and a product manager. And when Lovable announced a few weeks ago that you can vibe code real apps, including using generative AI right inside the platform, I knew I had to try it with a real use case. So I set myself a goal. Can I build a study app for my kid to study Latin translations in less than 2 hours? In this video, I will show you the whole process, start to finish. Stick around until the end, where I will put on my product management hat and assess what the implications are for building products and prototypes. And with that, let's get into the build. The first thing I'll actually do, I'll turn on the microphone here. And the reason I'm doing this is so that as I'm explaining what I'm doing, I will record myself so that's transcribed and can be used as context in ChatGPT. Okay, so the idea of the app is the following. My son currently is studying in middle school, 7th grade, and they have Latin. So what I'm trying to do here is to allow him to have sentences in German or English and being able to translate that based on the grammatical constructs that they already have and based on the words that they already studied, the vocabulary. The basic idea of the app is it's a mobile app, a very simple web app that can run on any device. App essentially knows what grammatical constructs the students already covered. So using an accusative object, for example, it has a set of vocab that the students already covered. And based on this information, it will produce a sentence like in German, die Kinder bringen das Geschenk. Just the kids bring the present. And they would have to translate that into Latin. And when they check that, if they get it right, they get a smiling Caesar or, I don't know, Caesar doing some other celebration. Show them it's right, and they can proceed to the next one. If they don't get it right, they see the sentence in the correct form. So showing the error, what they did wrong, and then the correct way to do it. And they have a button to get an explanation why this was wrong. And then if they click that, they would get an explanation that this particular word was in the wrong case. It should have been an accusative object, not a noun in nominative. And then they can go to the next sentence, and that's essentially it. So fairly simple. In terms of functionality, I think I covered everything. The one other use case that I'm going to leave out for now is they have this sort of almost like a categorization of different types of verbs in a sentence. So they underline nouns with a certain color, the verbs with a certain color, any adverbial with a certain color, and so on. So they have 5 or 6 different colors, and that should help them with structuring the order of the words in the sentence. So it could be a fun exercise to have them just, underline each word in a Latin sentence with those colors, just so that they can get used to the fact that the verb is in the end and so on. But I'll leave that out for now. Everything else should be there. You see that all the things where AI comes into play, I mark with AI, and just so we know which functionality uses AI either on the back end or whenever I'm using AI in the preparation. And this gets me into the next part. There's a couple of things I want to do before I dive into vibe coding. And why is that? Because when you look at vibe coding, it's very tempting. If you go to Lovable, it's very tempting to just say create a Latin app that translates and so on. So it's very, very tempting to go in there and just throw at it the first thing you got. I don't love that. I mean, it's fun. And sometimes I do that just to see what it comes up with. But generally, you sort of navigate yourself into a corner where it's hard to get out of. So the first prompt is actually very, very important. I think that's the first takeaway. First prompt is incredibly important. And so there's a couple of things I want to do to prepare for this, just so we have enough context, enough background information for Lovable in order to produce that sort of mimics this. I mean, this is just a very crude sketch. If it looks different, that's fine as well, but it should, by and large, look like what I just sketched on a piece of paper ahead of time. So that's really the only thing I did ahead of time. I sketched the sort of visualization of what I want to happen, just for myself to get an idea how this should look like. A couple things I have to do before we can get started. They have a bunch of words that they cover, and they have a few grammatical constructs, and I don't actually have everything from my son, so I'll do that later on, but we might just Google, or ask ChatGPT what are some of the first grammatical constructs you would learn in Latin, maybe some basic words, just so you get the sense of how this can look. I sketched the UI already, so that's done. This will produce a mock-up prompt, so I'll also add this to ChatGPT to produce sort of a basic prompt for Lovable. One thing that I like to do in general is when I'm using a tool like ChatGPT or Lovable, have another AI tool, another LLM, produce the prompt to contain everything that is important. And that's oftentimes based on me just rambling for a few minutes, just like I'm doing now. So if you go back to ChatGPT, this is still recording everything that I've said so far. This will be helpful down the road. For both the words and the grammatical constructs, as a means of sort of keeping track of the words, because this should be a growing app. This should keep track with new vocabulary that the students cover or new grammatical constructs that they cover. It needs some sort of storage or database in the background. For now, I'm using flat files, so just simple files for each. This could be done in a database down the road as well. First thing I'll do, I'll create a style guide just so we have a basic look of the app and that it stays roughly consistent. All right, let's stop this, and I will just say this will be, while it's still transcribing, this will be context for an app that I am building. The transcription, by the way, in ChatGPT is really good. That's generally my go-to app to do transcriptions of rambling like that. Of an app idea that I will build in Lovable. Summarize the idea in to be used as a prompt later. Keep formatting simple. And so I have it set to 5.1 thinking. 5.1 just came out the other day. Generally, I'm okay with waiting for a little bit. And as it's sort of thinking about what to do, I find that the result is better than if it just spits out things more instantly. So let's see what it comes up with. It's a Latin practice app, simple web app for 12 to 13-year-olds. Yeah, it seems to have everything pretty well neatly laid out. So key features is important. Lovable, if you don't give it any constraints, it might go and produce something that already has all the bells and whistles. We don't want that. We want a simple first version that we can iterate upon. So that's the maybe second takeaway that I generally try to follow. As you're building, don't go open-ended, because those vibe coding apps like Lovable will try to fill in the blanks and produce something that's visually stunning, but I like to constrain it. So when it says here key features for an MVP, this means that we say exactly how it should look, the known grammar topics, flat files, and it outlines the general exercise flow. And what I'll do now actually is, let's go back here. I'll copy this out. So what we'll do then is to pull in sketch, use this sketch as more context and supplement any missing details. I always find it interesting what it does with it. So here it takes this image and it's reading it with a Python script in the background. That's interesting. It's cropping it, tries to find where are the important sections. It's really interesting. As a former software engineer, I find it fascinating, the sort of thinking it goes through bit by bit. And then it produces sort of a description of each screen. Very nice. And from this sketch, it has the different screens, an exercise screen, a success screen. This is great. A review screen and an explanation screen. Yep, perfect. I mean, it's got the flow right. It's the different screens right. It really parses the image well. Yep, perfect. That should be sufficient for the app. So now the last thing I'll do is add a very simple style guide, or let's do it differently. What we want to do is essentially tell Lovable about the style first. So it uses that then to apply it to the whole app. So create a simple style guide for this app. Focus on large type for the language, serif fonts like Times New Roman for the Latin texts, and large button targets. The style should be whimsical enough to be used by middle schoolers. Perfect. Okay, I think we have enough context to give Lovable its first prompt. We'll copy that over and we'll say, actually, let's see. We did the style guide. We have a mockup prompt. We did that with AI. We sketched the UI. What we don't have is the flat files for the words and the grammar constructs. By the way, this has been 5 minutes of preparation. Again, it sort of helps overcome that being too eager to just get started right away. I almost fell into the same trap. We got the prompt and everything, but what we're missing is the actual content. So we're creating here an app that works on language. What we were missing entirely is what linguistical elements can the app work with. So we have to provide it with a few words and grammatical constructs. Again, I don't have all those verbs. So what I'll do real quick is get into a new screen here and say like, for a middle schooler studying Latin, I'll do one thing here that I often do instead of typing. I'll just record. For a middle schooler focusing on learning Latin, what is the basic vocabulary for the first 2 months that students typically would cover? Think about things like nouns, verbs, adjectives, any auxiliary verbs. So what is the basic vocabulary that a student has to know after about 6 to 8 weeks? And again, it's thinking here. I think this is one of the prompts that I probably could have done without thinking, although, you know, restricting it to the first few weeks and middle schooler and so on is probably good. Yeah, that's good. It suggests about 80 to 100 verbs. Let's look at the verbiage. Yeah, that sounds about right. Auxiliary verbs, probably okay. People and family, those I've definitely seen my son cover. Anything around school and the home, that's good. Adjectives, pronouns. Pronouns probably not so much, but we'll leave them in for now. Preposition is important as well, and small words as well. Great. So we need a flat list anyway, or maybe a structured list that we can put into a markdown file. What we'll do is, let's actually skip, while we're rephrasing anyway, let's skip, what was it? Pronouns. Okay, let's skip the pronouns, produce the full set of list of verbs in a markdown file with headings for the different sections. Provide that as markdown to copy. And we'll skip here because this is a fairly simple task. It doesn't have to think about that. And what happens is, that's great. That is a markdown file. Now we actually need this in German. Same version, translation to German. Again, we don't need to think about that. Translations is something that ChatGPT is incredibly good at. So let's go through here. Yep, perfect. Now, what I don't know, and maybe we'll have to process this down the road, is the format good for Lovable to then use that with AI, but I think that's actually good. This is not the full list though. We need the full list of all words from above. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, we'll copy and copy it actually for later. We'll go back to the previous one, and now we'll use the prompt. No, actually, again, almost forgot. Let's go back to the plan. Did all of that. We have the words. Let's take all the grammatical constructs as well. All right, same question about grammatical construct. Here are a few worksheets, and what I do here is I took a picture of a few of the worksheets they had just to cover the most important grammatical constructs. Those are just photos. I'll just drop them in for ChatGPT to analyze. And those are just simple worksheets that they did. This should pose no problem for ChatGPT to parse, although there's some handwriting on there that might be hard to read, but that should be easy enough to do. Let's see what he comes up with. And I'm realizing the prompt that I'm using here is not actually a great prompt. Like, I could have put a little bit more effort into this, like same question as what. So I probably should have said, like, you know, just like with the vocabulary, let's look at grammatical constructs. I will provide, and so on. Just a bit more verbosity. And that's why I think, again, it's a good idea to talk instead of type, because typing, I'm always restraining myself because typing takes a long time and talking is much faster. But we'll actually look at what it does. Yeah, so it's going through the worksheets one by one, trying to extract what's in there. Yeah, and it has everything that I've seen as well. Nouns, infinitive, third person singular plural, stem patterns. That's very good. Okay, so it will start assembling this grammatical list. So I will do the same thing, create a markdown file with grammatical. Let's actually wait until it's done so I can talk out loud. Okay, so it puts everything together in German, but nouns, verbs, different types of conjugations. So first, second, third, plural, and so on. Yep, very good. Different types of conjugations, sentence structures, the verb to be, esse, and different cases and functions. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so produce, again, fall in the same trap. Produce a markdown file with all the grammatical constructs, similar format as with the verbs. It should include the whole list of grammatical constructs listed here. The funny thing is, as I do this, sometimes I find myself trying to enunciate everything very clearly. It's not actually necessary. Whisper, which is the technology that ChatGPT uses to produce those transcripts, is really good at parsing even just, you know, mumbly speech or some speech. If you go and walk around for 2 hours and talk into your microphone with a lot of background noise, it's really still good at that. Okay, so I produced this markdown file, and that seems like a good structure for the declinations. It has different types of declinations. Yeah, that all seems good. Okay, I think now we're ready to jump into the fun part, or probably more fun part for you as a viewer. We did all the preparation and we defined the functionality. We're now about 30 minutes in. Let's see what we can do in that same time. So this was 30 minutes of preparation. I think it's well worth it. Let's see what we can do here. All right, jump back to this master prompt, I'll call it. I'll copy this whole prompt, which again, if you remember, it was based on my definition, talking out loud, and the sketch that I produced. So I copied this all. We'll go to Lovable and paste it in here. I'll just leave the spaces as they are. This does not really matter because it will parse out everything. One thing I'll add here as well is the style guide. Going to be a little lazy here because I didn't format this at all, but I will say style guide, and I'll add some markdown format here that Lovable knows this is a new section that's typically worked well in the past. I'll just paste everything in as it is. Let's maybe do a few more markdown formatting here. So this is the main title. We have a goal, we have a concept. And if you don't know what markdown is, it's a very simple way of formatting text. So why is that good for Lovable? It's because because it's so easy, it's just, using those hashtags for headings, for examples. 1 is heading 1, 2 is a heading 2, and so on. It's really easy to parse, and Lovable can really use it well for producing those different, or parsing those different sections. All right, we have the core concept main screen. I think this works well. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, some technical notes, and then we have a style guide. Very good. Okay, and then what we can do is we can attach files, and what we'll do is I will download this file if I can. I can copy it. Well, what we'll do then is just create this file and save it, and the second one as well. This is the grammar, and then the vocabulary is here. Very good. I still find myself playing with different apps as I'm building things like that. The other thing I'll probably paste in is the sketch. All right. So I pasted in the vocabulary, I pasted in the grammar and the original sketch, and a whole bunch of text. So this is a prompt. This is the result of me speaking out loud my idea, describing the flow, having ChatGPT translate everything. I'll already send that off because it will take a while. The one thing I want to stress is this is a lot of context, right? A lot of text, a lot of things to parse. This is good for something like Lovable, because if you just say create, the most basic form would be create an app that helps middle schoolers translate German to Latin, or the other way around. But that would not be sufficient. It says it's awaiting further instructions here. So clearly something is happening. It's interesting. Last time I built something more complex, it did not ask anything, built everything, and then either it was good or not. So I'm interested to see what it does here. So it says, I'll build a beautiful Latin practice app. Great. It's going to review the uploaded files. Great. And create the app with a specified design system. So it's recognized the design system. It's recognized the app and the sketch. That's all good. Now what it's asking is, this is not just an app that has, just a front end. It really requires some things in the back end. And those are primarily two things. One is built-in backend. This could work with just flat files. I think I'm okay with enabling that right now. What we definitely need is an LLM to parse and produce those different sentences. It says free to start, pay as you scale. I think that's fine for now. We can always disable it later. So I'll say allow, because if I didn't, the app really wouldn't work in the background. So let's do that. Okay, I assume this will take a while. So I will pause here for a second. It's 10:39, and I'll be back once Lovable came back with something usable. Okay, so I got myself a tea. Few minutes, I came back, everything was already ready. So this was faster than I thought. Let's first see just what it did before. I'm really eager to just try this right away. So it implemented apparently all the features. Implemented the design system, and AI integration generates sentences. So it seems like this is all already working. I'd be very surprised, but hey, you never know. Like the one thing that I already see is we said it should be a mobile app. This looks fairly desktop centric. Let's see if it would even work on mobile. So it seems like it's responsive enough that it does work, but you can't click Control Enter on mobile. So that's one thing. Maybe I should have added a bit more context, but we can fix that down the road. I will leave this in the mobile view because that's how it's going to work. And it's producing a example sentence. I'd be curious if those are predefined or if those are actually AI generated. My Latin is not very good anymore, or never was, if I'm honest. So I don't really know the translation of this. I will ask ChatGPT. Let's say translate to Latin. Don't think it needs to think to that. Actually, let's switch that to auto. Okay, let's see if that works. Checks it. Oh, and it's right. Okay, next sentence. Okay, so same sentence. Let's see what happens if you have it wrong. So again, we go back. What works so far is we have a question screen, and if it's correct, there's at least some celebration. It's no Caesar smiling, but it's some celebration. That's great. What you want to check now is this flow right here. So what we'll do is we'll say the same thing, but instead of saying teacher as an accusative object, it should be just in nominative. There's no explanation so far, so I'll ask it for an explanation. And it says, I switched the subject into object. Very good. And the object should be in accusative, not nominative. This is pretty impressive. Let's try another one. All right. For some reason, it's focusing on the same verb, loving. And I don't want every sentence to include loving. You know, this could produce some weird things for middle schoolers. I think that's actually the exact wrong verb to be used for middle schoolers. Let's, at this point, look at the code and see what it does. And we can probably also just enable chat. So my first thought always is let's look at the code, but I'm aware not every one of you is, of course, a software engineer or has experience doing that. So let's ask Lovable about this verb. Where are, actually Lovable also added this. I will allow it to use my microphone. Where are the verbs saved? And it will either come back and say like those are saved in the cloud, in a database, or in a flat file, like we said. So, and it shows it's not a database, it's actually in a separate file, vocabulary TS. Let's see if we can click on that. We cannot. Let's look at that file. So even if you're not a coder, source data vocabulary, we're in the folder source, we'll go to data and we see vocabulary. It has the whole vocabulary here. And in terms of verbs, where is the verb loving? Interesting, I don't know, it's here. It's amare. It's interesting that it's always using the same verb. Let's see if this was just a fluke or if this is actually always the case. So this would be something like puer mat. I don't remember what the girl is. So just write the girl. We'll check it and it will say the girl is wrong. Of course, because this is not a Latin verb. This takes quite some time. So one improvement could be to pre-produce the sentence here. So as it's producing the German sentence, it should be producing the Latin one as well, so it doesn't have to think about it when it comes back. But let's explain that. Oh, and it's interesting. So the explanation is done right away. So the explanation is always produced ahead of time as well. Yep, all good. Let's try the next sentence. And somehow it's reverting to the same words. So this is really interesting, right? It's the functionality of the app is actually spot on. It's exactly what we wanted. It seems to work. Here is where I think vibe coding, especially with things that include AI, gets a little shaky. So for some reason, the prompt it's using for the AI is very skewed towards this verb and the nouns around, boy, teacher, girl, and so on. I wonder why that is. Let's ask, how is the prompt for the German sentence generated? And so again, instead of just telling Lovable to do something, I'm starting to chat with it as well. Because I think, just like if you told an engineer, hey, go build this app, and this engineer went and built you the app just like it's specified in your sketch and in your description, it's definitely not the case that everything would work exactly right. You have it in your head because it's really hard to do that. Same thing here. We gave it a whole bunch of context. It gotten pretty far, but it's not exactly where it's supposed to be. So what I'm doing here is it doesn't exactly do what I want. So I'm asking it, how are you producing this sentence? And it showed me how it does that. So there is a system prompt that the app produces, which is your Latin teacher for beginners, 7th grade, create a simple German sentence that should be translated into Latin. Important, only use the verbs. Interesting. So it's saying only use the verbs, and then it has a specific set of verbs, not the ones that we specified, because, you know, those are just 4, 10, 20 words. So it will only use these words to produce sentences, which is why, you know, there's not a lot of things you can do with you know, if you only have nouns, which is woman, teacher, male teacher, female teacher, and girl, boy, that's not a lot you can do, even with to be, to do, to read, and so on. So those are not sufficient to produce sentences. What we'll have to do now is to let Lovable know to use the vocabulary in the background. Everything else I think looks fine. Only use this grammar, actually same thing. And the sentence should be short, sentence should be clear, sure. And then, you know, use this particular JSON object as a response. That's all good. So really the only thing we have to change is, instead of a hard-coded list or a fixed list of words to use the ones in the predefined list. Okay. In this prompt, you're providing a fixed set of list, which is very small and limits the output of both the German and the Latin sentences. We have words and grammar in separate files. Use those words and that specific set of grammar in order to produce the sentence. Let's see what it does with that. I mean, in general, I'm loving this process, because I think this shows really where the different shortcomings are with those vibe coding tools. They can only infer what you think. And 2, I think for cost reasons sometimes, those vibe coding tools will take shortcuts. And I've noticed that with another app that I've built, where I've asked it to do a whole bunch of things for 8 or 9 different sections of an app. It did the first 2, and then for the rest, it just stated, this will be built in the future. So because everything that's output here will cost Lovable money, it will not go open-ended and do whatever is required. It will stop short of that and just, you know, produce whatever is necessary. When we go back and specify that, it will go further than this initial attempt. Okay, so it said I will update the edge functions. Let's look at all the details that it did. Build is unsuccessful, so let's just try to fix that. Sometimes that happens, that it produces files that can't be really used or parsed correctly, and Lovable has a way to self-heal, and we'll try to do that. Then I see the issue. There's no database schema, that's right. Okay, so very interesting. What it was trying to do here, and maybe we can see this in the code, it will try to, or it did try to get those words from the predefined list that we gave. However, I think it can't really, or does not want to use the vocabulary list and grammar rules that we specified in the files. And interesting, by the way, we see that it did exactly what I asked it to do. Instead of hard coding things, it's using a variable for that, and for the grammar rules and the vocab list, I think it's trying to get that from a database instead of the flat file, which is okay. But that means it has to create the database first. And what does it do? It seems like this only stores metadata, so it doesn't use the database yet. Let's see what it does. I don't quite know yet. So yes, we will allow Lovable to create a database. It doesn't do much yet. Maybe in a second step, it will also create the data in this database. And again, this shows a little bit that you might get into situations pretty quickly where you have to look at the code, or at least look at what it created in order to understand what happened. All right, we'll go back to preview. Let's actually reload this whole page and see what it comes up with. All right, now it says the student views the teacher. Still only using the same nouns. I'm not sure it actually changed anything. Let's see. Yeah, it's definitely created a database, but there's no data in it yet. Let's reload again to make sure this is not just a fluke. Yep, student, teacher. This does not use those verbs yet. So we'll have to go back and say like, I see you're using variables now to change the system prompt. Where are you getting those words and the grammar rules from to use in the variables? And I'm noticing I've started, my first prompts were all very technical, but I've definitely started talking to Lovable and other similar apps in a very anthropomorphic way. So I'm talking to it like it's a human, some, fellow engineer or someone who's building things. It seems to work. I'm not sure it's necessary. I'm not sure it's hurting, but I'm definitely noticing I'm really chatting to a system rather than giving it hard commands. Okay, so it's saying it's dynamically loading it, and grammar rules still hard-coded. So the grammar files exist, not being used at all, while the vocabulary now is dynamic. I doubt that it is. So we'll say the vocabulary, well, let's talk it out again. The vocabulary still uses a very limited set of words. Make sure you're using the original file, which is in source data vocabulary.ts, and make sure you're using the same grammar rules that are in the grammar.md file and not a hard-coded set of strings. Actually, let's just do vocabulary for now and try to get this right, and then we'll focus on grammar. That's another takeaway, by the way, for Lovable. As you're hitting issues, do one thing at a time. And I have to remind myself to do that all the time. So let's just fix the vocabulary for now. It's saying that verbs, nouns, adjectives were used, but not the full list. And it's trying to pass more things into it. Let's see what it did here. Oh, interesting. It really only did verbs, nouns, and adjectives. Took another shortcut. And then now is adding prepositions, conjunctions, verbs. Where is it using this vocabulary from? Yeah. And it really is sourcing it from the original file. That is interesting. Grammar rules still hard-coded. That's okay for now. Let's see what will happen. Oh, there's another build error. We'll fix that. So it's come back, and this is where I think a lot of frustration lies with vibe coding tools. It said it's fixed everything, but somehow there's an issue with the backend, and it's getting pretty specific here with regards to why things are not working. Oh, interesting. But then there are at least some adjectives and some different nouns. Always the student, though. Oh, no, there's the boy views a book. Yeah, it's a very limited set of lists. There's still this issue with the word love. I think I'll have to remove that because the girls love the teacher. I don't know. Yeah, I'm a bit stumped. Okay, so I think actually, now that I step back and look at this, it seems to be using the right vocabulary, but because we're using very basic grammar, and again, let's look at the grammar. It really can't create anything that's complicated because we're using very simple grammar. Okay, so it seems like we fixed the vocabulary for now. Let's ask Lovable to fix the grammar. The vocabulary is now sourced from a file. That works great. Now do the same with the grammar rules. The grammar constructs are saved in the following file. The original result was 80% there, and as usual, in the classical Pareto style principle, getting it to 100% will require 80% of the effort. What it does is it's saying like, hey, I can use markdown files in code, so I will export that into a TypeScript file, something that it can better read in essence. So it created grammar rules.ts, which is exactly the same thing. That's good. It will pass this as one string. So I guess that makes sense. Build was again unsuccessful. We'll try to fix that. And if it comes back with the same cryptic thing as before, we'll just ask it to not spin up a database, because so far we're not using a database. No reason to spin one up if you're not using it. Okay, somehow it's fixed something. Yeah, very, very, very specific. So this, I would not expect anyone without training in software engineering to understand. So this is getting fairly specific. I'm surprised actually that something fairly simple on the back end already produced issues, but we'll leave that aside for now. One thing that I was just wondering before, as I was waiting, I was kind of looking into some code, and what I noticed is, so it's using the vocabulary list. This is the backend code, so the code that will send prompts to an LLM, again, such as ChatGPT, and it builds its vocabulary list, and then in the end, interestingly, it still adds those basic 15 or so words, which I think is why we mostly saw those in the sentences. So I will ask it to remove those. Or, one thing I could do is also to just edit the code. It's like, you know what? We don't need that. We just want this whole list. Instead of asking it, I can edit the code. I feel like I'm well equipped to do that. I've written code in the past. Same thing with the grammar rules, by the way. What this is essentially saying is like, hey, get the grammar rules from the file that we just did, and then add these very simple grammar rules that it's put in by default. We will just omit that and just use the ones that we provided in the file. Hit the save button, and let's just see some of the sentences it's generating to see if the changes that we made with the grammar rules and the extended set of words actually worked. Interesting. So now it doesn't have simple subject, verb, object sentences only, but it says the boy calls the girl and is calling her or calling out her. So already a slightly more complex grammatical structure. The boy sees the teacher. The boy sees the woods or the forest. The boy sees the teacher. So somehow there's still something there. But okay, I think that's good for now. I can go down the rabbit hole and do this down the road. I think the basic functionality works. Let's see. I think it's something like Magister loben. I don't remember what praise means. It means laudare maybe. And the student, it's a girl. That would be puellam. No, I think that's just girl. But we build an app that will check my Latin. So let's see what it says. No, in fact, it is right. Okay, so I would have passed this test. Now clicking on next sentence, it will load something new. Okay, so that all works. We saw that the corrections are also nice. What if we say here, Puella videt magis. I'll check this. Let's have that explained. The explanation is good. But it doesn't do the sentence structure. Let's check for sentence structure. So again, the sentence structure, this should be in the end. I think this turns out to be more of a Latin test for myself than for my kid. So I can't focus on the sentence structure until it's correct. But I do like the response because it's really correcting it nicely. It says, hey, the first sentence was you didn't write this verb correctly. The second error was that you used the wrong verb in accusative. So it's really giving good feedback. Let's try again. We'll copy that in and we will change the sentence structure. I'm trying to see if that's correct. It somehow changes the verb. It says I used the wrong verb, but it doesn't correct the sentence structure. So I think we'll have to add this to the grammar rules. Add a requirement to always check for sentence structure. I just did add something to the grammar rules. I think that's fine. It doesn't have to be in a certain form because, again, this is just information we're passing to the AI tool, to the LLM. Hopefully the correct translation will move the verb into the middle, and let's see if it checks that. Yeah, it doesn't check for that. Let's try another one just to make sure. This amat should really be in the back, and it probably doesn't check for that. No, it says this is right. Okay, so we'll have to specify. Sentence structure must be enforced better. For example, make sure to check for verbs in the end. Maybe instead of saying check for, we'll see what it does here, but instead of saying check for verbs in the end, we'll have to give it a certain set of specific rules to check for. But we'll see what it does here, and if not, we'll produce a new set of grammar rules. Now, it's checked for verb being in the end. Typical sentence structure, subject, object, verb. Yep. And it's saying now it will have to check for that and that this is critical. We'll see if that works. So the thing working with AI backends is that we only know if it works once we test it. Now, I'll go on a side tangent here. If this was a real app that I would launch, there's a few best practices that you could do to check the quality of the response of the AI. So you would, hit it with a large number of predefined test cases and measure what it does in the end. So for this, I would probably, generate a few hundred examples, run it through, and make sure that the output of the AI system, of the LLM, is what I would expect. That approach is called evals, and it's essentially a way to test whether the output of a system matches what you would expect based on a certain input. You did those things you would have done with tests in the past as well, with systems that are more sort of determined or deterministic what they do. LLMs are not deterministic, so they might return different things for the same input, but we want to make sure that, at least to a high extent, it's returning what we would expect. Unfortunately, it still says this is correct. So maybe let's ask the system, how do you check the output for correctness, especially with regards to sentence structure? Instead of trying to hunt down, where is it? What happened? Why is it not working? Banging my head against the table. I will just ask the system what it does, and maybe we can see there something that isn't quite right. Okay, the evaluation process is not checking against the grammar rules, especially sentence structure requirements. But what happens? Very interesting. So I'll do this in Miro, just for shits and giggles. So the process that it's using is, it has an initial prompt, which is create a sentence in German. And what it's doing is it's adding the vocab and it's adding the grammar. So essentially, what it's saying is, hey, create a sentence. You're only allowed to use a certain set of words and a certain set of grammatical rules. Now, we actually ask, or the app is sending a second prompt, which is check this response against the original sentence or the translation. And if you really want to check this, you would have to check, clearly against the vocabulary, but you also would have to check against all those different grammar rules. But this second prompt knows nothing about that anymore, because the only thing it has, so let's do this in green, that's the output. The only thing it's working with is this. So the output of that prompt is the input for this one. This is not part of it. So what we'll have to do is essentially say like, hey, check it, but also consider those rules and consider this set of vocabulary, because that's the other thing is there's always multiple ways of saying something in each language, even in Latin, which is a bit more strict. So what you probably want to do is say like, hey, check this. And remember, those were the words that we have. When you work with AI in those different apps, it's important to actually, shift your perception of AI away from those like ChatGPT like models, because here you really look at it as a chat. So with everything I'm typing, ChatGPT remembers the whole history and retains that as context for every new prompt. This one is not using ChatGPT, it's just using the GPT model, which does not retain the history. So whenever you add a prompt, at least with the way we're working right now, you still have to provide the context for the initial prompt in order for that to make sense. Why this matters, and this should probably explain exactly what we just did. Yes, these rules are only used during exercise generation, not evaluation. And so it's noticing what's wrong, and it's already suggesting some ways to fix this. So we'll just have to do, you know what? You're right. Implement the plan. And you know what? While we're at it, while that's working on it, I really want to remove this word love from the file just because it's creating sometimes some sentences that are not okay. Also, that's another thing that you can't control. So especially when you work with language, the outputs of those LLMs might be inappropriate or removed from context that you actually want to use. If, again, this was a real app suitable for 12 and 13-year-olds, I would make sure by design that the output of those sentences are only what I would expect there to be. So that this does not produce some suggestive sentence or other things that don't make sense, violent things or racist things. I don't have any of those checks and balances in here. This was a real app that I would be, selling or producing for the market. This is something that I would, of course, have to do. If we get far enough, I might, have my kid look at this and use it sitting next to him. So this is, for all intents and purposes, not even a prototype. This is just an experiment. So just having said that, so here I'm just removing the word love because it's creating some inappropriate sentences that should not be used in the context of 12 and 13-year-olds or should not be used in general. Okay, so it's applied, let's save that. It's applied those checks also at evaluation time. So let's see, and we'll move the verb again into the middle. And now it says, hey, that's wrong. Why is that? If we explain it, it should come back with like, hey, the sentence structure is wrong. Yep, exactly. And that's what it does. So we can say when correcting sentence structure, make sure every fragment only appears once, and then we'll test that again once it's done fixing it. Okay, and it did. It strikes through the wrong sentence structures, and in green is the correct one. Why is that? And that's good. So, hey, I think the functionality of the app now works well. And you could always add more and make this cooler, make this different. So I think one thing I want to try is to polish this app up a little bit so that when Kit comes home from school, I can give it to him and see if he actually wants to use that, and essentially try and test it with a real user. And I would absolutely tell you to do that with your apps as well. If you code anything, even if it's just a prototype or something used internally, test it early with real users, because I don't learn Latin. I'm not learning Latin right now. He's learning. He has to study that. So who am I to tell him that this is the right way to do? So let's just make a couple changes to this and then call it a day for this experiment. It's already an hour and we're about an hour and 40, an hour and 50 in. I feel like that's pretty good for an app that uses AI in the background to help a student study Latin. Okay, this tip here, which is press Control Enter to send it, we don't need that. So I'll just delete this whole thing. Yeah, that's what we want to do. Somehow it doesn't let me. Let's try to delete that again. Oh, save. Okay, something's not saved yet apparently. Okay, I just didn't save it, and so it didn't disappear yet. I thought it would do this right on the spot, but it didn't. That's all good. Then the header. Let's see actually this whole app in your new window. Now that we're more on sort of the visual level and we're trying to make this look a little bit more passable, It's helpful to see this in sort of a narrow mobile view. I will publish this app. Let's call this, what should we call this? This is a Latin study app. So we'll call this, let's call this I'm sure my kid will cringe at this name. You can always change that later. That's the beauty of iterating. Okay, so as I'm publishing this, it's doing a security scan. Again, this is just a prototype, so I'm going to omit that. I would, of course, first thing I would do in a production app is I would look into what is the problem security-wise. But let's publish that. Yes, we will publish anyway. Now it can load it. Okay, again, what you want to look at is how does this look on mobile screens? And so I'm using a Chrome-based browser here, so Brave or Chrome would work well because it can show me how this would look on an actual phone. So for example, if I had an iPhone 12 Pro, this is how it would look. And I think that's fine. On a mobile screen, it's not too big. You don't have to scroll. There's big buttons, big type. I think that's all good. Now let's do one. Let's change the name here to Quizzer also. And then what else do we have to check? Okay, so this also looks good on a mobile screen, or good enough at least. Oh yeah, no, this is all good. If we explain it, that's good. I think this looks actually passable on mobile devices. I will publish this. And with that, we have a workable app. If it does what it should, when my kid uses it, I'm seeing there's another grammatical construct. This is an imperative, ordering someone to work. I think this works really well. I'm happy with how far we got. In an hour and 55 minutes, I'll leave it at that. And I might add other features after the fact. Maybe I'll do another episode of this, but I love it. I think this is great so far. I hope I was able to give you a bit more pointers what to look for, how to approach writing complete app. We've stumbled across a couple issues on the way. Some things that you can absolutely fix without coding. Some things I think, came close to having to fix with code. So this whole security issue and the database thing, we're not actually using a database in the backend. So I feel like, we were a bit premature in using those databases. That was not something that Lovable would have had to do. But I hope that I was able to show you how I go about fixing issues, going one thing at a time, being clear what I want, always providing context, looking at the code, testing it, testing the functionality, but then also testing an iteration. So at this point, I'll step away from the device and have someone actually use the app. You could add streaks here. You could add other types of quizzes, speed quizzes. You could do a whole bunch of things. This is really not worth it if no one uses it. So if this is helpful for my kid, then great. Then I might add some other things down the road, but every app has a user or a purpose. All right, it is Monday now. I built this app on Friday, and over the weekend, my son was able to take the app for a spin, really test it, and gave me some really good feedback. So I spent maybe 2 or 3 hours polishing it a bit, iterating based on his feedback, and the app is usable. He's used it to prepare for a test this week, so I guess I'd consider that a success. But I want to take this opportunity to really drive home a few points from more of a product perspective or product manager perspective, and tell you a few things that I would consider if this was a production app, be that for a learning or study app like this, or for any prototype that you would use maybe in a business context. The first one is, I think, a tool like Lovable or Replit or Bold or V2 or whatever they're called. I think they're really good at validating ideas. If you have something in your head, an idea that hey, I really would love to see if this works. Lovable, vibe coding apps are fantastic to try that, especially now that you can tie in generative AI on the back end. I think this is fantastic, but I think it's just that. It's something to validate an idea, not for production use cases. Next, we saw in the course of the build, sometimes the app just generates weird sentences or just unacceptable sentences, something that you could not put in front of 12-year-olds And I think this shows a bit of the limitation of generative AI, which is you really have to set the guardrails, what's acceptable and what not. And even if you do set the guardrails, sometimes the generated words don't match those guardrails or go a little bit too far. I've had an instance where it generated a sentence with grammar that was not covered yet, and my son said, "Hey, I don't know this, and now I feel like I'm not ready for the test." So it might work for 90, 95, 8%, but it just is not quite reliable enough for production use cases. I think that's just a fact. I think you can get closer and closer, but there are diminishing returns in improving the prompts. And then there's a lot of work needed to really improve it to the point where it's production ready. Which brings me to the next point. A large chunk of the costs are actually the sentences and translations that are generated every single time. And I think that's something that actually doesn't have to happen on the spot. So I think if I were to productize this app, I would generate 100, 200, 300, 400 sentences at a time, checking them for acceptable use. Again, sexism, racism, unacceptable sentences. And producing them ahead of time would mean you only have to do it once. That would save costs. It would improve performance as well, because you don't ask an LLM to produce a sentence always on the spot. So if I were to productize this would probably be the first thing I would do. Where it is good though, where the app really shines, I think, and I think where generative AI is really good, is checking something. And I've seen that in other apps and other prototypes that I've built in a business context. Whenever you ask a generative AI tool or a generative AI platform to summarize, check, extract, it's really good at that. Generating something from scratch, there's rough edges. Summarizing something, so taking something larger, making it smaller essentially, or again, checking a translation and then providing feedback, I think it's really good at that. And that's true for many generative AI use cases. So maybe if you're considering using AI for different use cases, consider, is this something that generates something from scratch or takes something existing and trying to boil it down, summarize, or extract something. And then with regards to building apps in general, I think we've already seen it a little bit. Testing becomes quite hard at some point. And it's not hard because you can't test well, but especially with AI, because it's non-deterministic, you have to test every time from scratch. And again, there are ways to get around that, but that's not a 2-hour vibe coding project. Then you're really doing proper software development. So this just shows that I think prototyping is where those vibe coding apps are really good at. Once you get beyond the prototypes, things that you would do regularly, like testing, gets really hard. Security becomes incredibly hard. We haven't talked about that at all. This app is providing a input field for the sentence to be translated. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of attack vectors that someone could use to try and hack the app. So app security is really something that if this was a productized app, you would have to look at and make sure nothing nefarious can be done with it. I saw in the code when I looked over it out of curiosity, Lovable is taking some measures to avoid prompt injections and so on, and it's parsing the output. So that's all good. It's a first step. And I think just like with any other app you would build, you would really have to invest into understanding what content gets into the app, what could someone do with it, and then prevent that. And then the last thing I'll say is, after recording this video, when I was iterating on the performance of the app, I had to really tweak the prompts quite a lot. And not just the contents, the text of the prompts, but there are other parameters such as something called the temperature, which essentially is a notion of how creative, quote unquote, should the LLM be in producing the sentences and also while checking it. If you use a tool like ChatGPT or Gemini, the temperature is always the same. But if you use it on the API side, you can change it from very, very strict to really, really creative, but also error prone. So I had to adjust this quite a bit. And for this, you just need the knowledge about those tools. So again, the vibe coding platform can provide you a good starting point. If you want to go beyond that, you really have to know what you're doing, and only then you can get a better output than just what you get if you prompt Lovable. With that, I really hope you enjoyed this build. I know this was a longer video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like videos like that, check out my other videos down below, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of those videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.